Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
We're watching Fanboy.
A fanboy, etc.
Fanboy Nation.
Dot, I assume Tom.
Premiering at Dances with Films here in Southern California, in Los Angeles, on June 16th. I am speaking with Sean Cisterna, the director of the documentary The Long Rider. Sean, this is a tremendous documentary, 8 years in the making, and my God, just going from Canada to Brazil.
Yeah, can you imagine? Filipe, our protagonist, was inspired by this story that he read as a kid. His father read to him called Cisterna's Ride, and it's the story of this Swiss school teacher in the 1920s who rode horseback from Argentina to New York, and but in the 1920s. So when Filipe, had to undergo his migratory trek from Canada to Brazil, did it in that fashion that he was inspired by as a kid. Pretty amazing story.
The fact that someone will take art and have it mirror their life at some point. This is not an easy task by any means, and then other times, in this instance, life has imitated art and vice versa. So this is just completely cyclical.
Yeah, I've never heard it quite described the way you did, which is a very apt understanding of the story. But for sure, yeah, he definitely was inspired by this story that he read as a kid. And but the fact that our documentary takes place 100 years later after that initial ride in the 1920s, I mean, things are a lot different now, certainly with traffic and borders and bureaucracy. So when Filipe his permanent residency lapsed and was had to get back to his family in Brazil. I mean, he wanted to do it in the most epic way possible, which is riding horseback from Canada to Brazil on two horses kind of donated to him.
Wow. And this is a modern Western in a sense, because he's doing this cowboy lifestyle that is virtually unheard of by modern society. And like you said, traffic is different. In 1925, there was 50 to 80 cars on the road. And here there's one every 10 feet.
Yeah, a lot of obstacles along the way. Certainly traffic and transport trailers were just one of the problems that Filipe had to overcome. But when you think about this 2.5 year journey to get back home to your family, so many obstacles along the way. There was not only traffic, but heat and lack of water, drought, and corrupt border guards and nasty weather. So it's a real, I guess you really have to be a strong person to even take that first initial step to undergo a journey such as this. Because I don't think I could do it. I'm not sure. I don't want to speak for you, but it's probably not a journey anyone kind of wants to undertake. But I think the film kind of explores a long rider's deep desire to connect to the natural world.
And how is Filipe doing today? Because he had a couple of mental breakdown issues, the loneliness by traveling by himself on this journey. There's a time where the self-reflection can also become disastrous when you submit yourself to your darker thoughts.
Yes, I think Filipe did definitely have that chronic loneliness issue, and even after he thought he succeeded and kind of made it home, I mean, that's when the problems kind of started, and he went into this spiral of depression. But what got him back out of that was his relationship with his horses. Filipe always said that he got his master's in journalism at university, but his degree in humanity from the horse, and it was pretty just a symbiotic relationship, him and his horses kind of working alongside each other emotionally as well, not only as transportation, but as life partners going down this epic journey together.
Yeah. And are the horses still with him at this point?
They are, yeah. Frenchie is still around. Well, I'll have to get an update on where the other two are. But I just saw a video recently of Frenchie and Filipe doing a promo for one of our screenings together.
Wonderful, because I mean, to go through all that and the horses returned his humanity, or actually taught him about humanity, and to lose them all, that would have been just an even greater tragedy for him.
Yeah, I mean they are animals, of course, and they don't live as long as humans. But these horses had are living an incredible life, and imagine they've seen more countries than most humans have, and have gone through more experiences than most of the world has. So it's a pretty remarkable experience for all of them to share together.
Dealing with these border guards at times, and the corrupt ones and the just ones, how do you explain it to immigration that you need this pass-through visa on horseback? Was everyone's general reaction of like, why don't you just buy a plane ticket and you'll be there in 6 hours?
Yeah, and I think that crossed Felipe's mind many times as well, as he kind of suffered at each border and waited for an answer upon his fate. But as the first border between Canada and going south to the United States, that was the easiest border to cross, and then incrementally they became harsher and harsher. And I don't know what it is. One of our the expert an expert long rider, Cullen O'Reilly, said that border guards are an extension of the ancient Roman prejudice against anyone mounted on horseback, and they thought they were all uncivilized. And so I guess that mentality has gone through the ages, and anyone who kind of passes a border on horseback is seen as someone who isn't civilized. And so I think that the challenge was trying to break down those barriers and pass through as legally as possible. But in some cases, as you'll see in our film, there was not an opportunity to go through a border legally.
Well, I didn't want to give it too much away, but you gave that spoiler out there. So, there's but the thing is, it's not that he was an illegal immigrant in that regard. It's the fact that it was just an illegal border crossing trying to get home.
Yeah, and some countries have rules that aren't really published on any website or anything, and so when he'd show up at the border, they'd claim that, oh no, these horses need to stay in quarantine for 3 months, and there's you need thousands of dollars in tests on them, and we need to ensure that they're not carrying any disease from the previous country. And so it just became a logistical nightmare for Filipe and his efforts to get back home.
Because as we've learned in the last 2 years, viruses don't hop borders quite easily.
And they're not just for, it's not just a human condition. So apparently viruses attack horses as well.
Oh, man. This is what made you want to tell Filipe's story. Like, how were you introduced to Filipe, and what made you sit there and go, boom, this is it. I got to make this film.
I have a really close connection to the story. Filipe and I went to high school together. We went to the same high school. I'm a few years older than Filipe is, but our former teacher introduced us at one point, and a few years later, I kind of followed Filipe's story on social media and saw him traveling through all these different countries. Didn't quite put the reason why this was all happening until I read his book. He wrote a book on his adventures from Canada to Brazil that I read, fell in love with, and then immediately called him and said, can I be the one to tell this story? And thankfully he agreed based on our previous friendship.
One interesting thing is the U.S. gets a bad rap of deportation, yet Canada did the same thing. This isn't just a one-way street from the U.S. trying to get rid of everybody. This happens internationally all the time. So it's interesting to see that perspective being shown in your film.
Yeah, it was surprising for me to see that as well. Like when Canada is seen as this open and progressive country, and we welcome immigrants from all over the world, but when it all came down to like sloppy paperwork on Filipe's family side, and it's through no fault of their own. I mean, they got some bad advice from a lawyer, but it's amazing how, a country can kind of become faceless in the throes of adhering to bureaucratic measures. And so, it's not like you can plead your case to anyone. There's a border guard there that is responsible for, telling people whether they can stay or go. And he just got, his family got one of the unsympathetic, bureaucrats, and that was the end of the family's road here in our country, at least.
Well, Filipe came to Canada at a rather young age. So there has to be a point where, like every immigrant or first generation born into a country, like myself, I don't fully feel American, but I don't fully feel Middle Eastern. Filipe, although born in Brazil, is ethnically Brazilian, but still Canadian in his upbringing. How does that play on him being, I'm kind of Canadian, but not really. I'm kind of Brazilian, but not really. And now I have to go back to a country that, yes, that's where I'm from, but it hasn't been home since I was, let's say 6 years old, for example.
Yeah. And that seems to be like the typical immigrant experience from all the people that I've spoken to along the way. Filipe, just as you said, he was born in Brazil. He moved to Canada, felt Canadian, but was told on a piece of paper that he wasn't, and had to go back. So he doesn't feel like he has a home, and that's the toughest part, at least geographically. I think that he feels a sense of home now that he is with his fiance Clara, and that kind of keeps him grounded, and home is where she is right now, wherever that may be in the world.
Well, at least he found love through all of this as well.
Yeah, after all the ups and downs, and roller coasters of emotions, and high points and low points, that's a similar story for a lot of people. When you find love, that kind of trumps every sort of obstacle that the world can throw at you. And I think that's a beautiful part of this story. It's grounded in humanity, even though it's expansive and traverses different cultures and ethnicities. It's that's that human condition of love that kind of brings us all together.
Listen, man, I dated a girl in my late teens, early 20s that wouldn't get me a glass of water in her house, let alone someone that would cross borders or a continent to be with anyone. So right. Filipe is one of the luckiest guys out there.
He's a very lucky guy, yes.
You went to high school with him. There's this personal connection. There's the book that drew you in, along with the teacher that connected you. What has the international reaction been like, or is this the world premiere here at Dances with Films?
No, we've screened at a couple festivals already. We started in Beaufort, South Carolina, and that was our first screening, and we happened to win the audience award, like the best of the festival. Then we screened in Florida at the Sunscreen Film Festival, also won the best documentary there. We screened at a documentary festival in Edmonton in Canada, and won the audience award there as well. So this will be, and then we were in Mumbai, India last week at the Mumbai International Film Festival. And that was an amazing screening, just sold out, and the people sitting in the aisles. It was a really incredible experience. But this will be our West Coast premiere at Dances with Films, and we're beyond excited to be able to screen at the Chinese theaters and bring our film to the West Coast.
South Carolina and Florida might as well be two different planets at this point. And to add Mumbai in this, what was the reaction in India versus the reaction in South Carolina versus the reaction in Florida?
It seems to be a universal feeling of elation, and there is audiences are left crying at some points, gasping with the adventures that happen along the way, cheering. We heard a lot of cheering, and just a general feeling of hope and optimism. I think after 2.5 years of being stuck in our homes and being socially isolated and distant from one another, this is a film that gives a bit of hope and inspiration to audiences. So I think they're all relishing in that fact.
What is next for someone like Filipe that took 2 years to cross 12 countries to get home to Brazil? And we'll put home in air quotes in this regard, because it hadn't been his home for so long. Like, what adventure could top this next? Either parenthood or Everest?
Yeah, I'm not sure his next adventure will be quite as daunting a task physically, but Felipe is a trained journalist. I mean, he studied journalism in school, so he's writing his third book about his last trip from Alaska to Calgary to kind of complete the journey of the Americas. So by the end of this year, he'll have three different books chronicling his adventures throughout the Americas, and he's one of only a select handful, certainly the youngest person in the world to have crossed the Americas on horseback.
Sean, at some point, as the filmmaker for this, do you sit there and think, man, I'm lazy in that I didn't want to take out the trash yesterday, but here's my buddy that crossed two continents just to get home because of deportation?
You know what? I've made some other films that have gone to different festivals, and I've always felt like the rock star there, like because audiences clap and want to talk to the director afterwards. In this case, it's all Felipe, man. Like no one gives a shit about me or what my efforts were in the making of this film. But deservedly, Felipe gets the attention for this one because it is something that audiences will likely never get to experience ever again. There will never be a story like this told in the foreseeable future, just because borders are getting far more and more restrictive, and every day it becomes more difficult to cross a border, even legally, right? So it's a challenge that like I said, I don't think it'll ever happen in our history again.
So what has been your personal greatest adventure?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of prior to the pandemic. I mean, we had the narrative version of the script ready to go. So, we had a full script ready with actors lined up to play these parts of Felipe's story. But then the border shut down with COVID, and our script was no longer producible. And we couldn't shoot our Canadian film in Mexico or Brazil because the borders were shut down. And so having that quick forethought to pivot when Felipe said, I shot all this footage on my journey, maybe we could do a documentary first. And I thought it was a great idea to help support the eventual narrative version, which we'll do hopefully next year as restrictions start to lift around the world.
Well, I would love to see that as well.
Yeah. You'll be our first interview afterwards.
Oh, you are too kind. I really appreciate that. The documentary itself, the long rider, just to live this experience and to have these reactions, and now to be on the West Coast with Dances with Films, one of our most recognizable ones here in Southern California. What does that say to the efforts that the two of you have made to put this together, to reach a global audience as well as a North American audience, and to be so appreciated for your efforts?
I think we did a smart thing in the fact that our film is centered around horses. I mean, horses are universally loved. They've been a symbol throughout our history, our world history for the centuries. So, I mean, the horse is like a common greeting or bond between fellow humans, and it's very easy to find horse lovers. So when you screen a film that has to do with horses, the horse community at first will come out and support the film, and word will grow from there. And also because we've been living in a pandemic, it's been difficult to travel, and this film gives us the opportunity to see all these different cultures and lands through our film, and at a time when it's not easy to travel.
Was there also fear of animal rights activists coming out of the woodworks and complaining about the documentary itself? Because one of the horses does get stuck in a giant hole, and that is shown in the trailer, so I'm not giving away too much.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't heard anything negative yet. It's a story that happened. It's not like it's not like that was set up. I mean, we were recording life as it happened. And that would just happen to be one of the incidents that happened along the way. I think where the activism might come in is if we did that intentionally to a horse, like in the narrative version of the making of this film. But this is not that movie. This is a film that happened, and a camera happened to be rolling. And when you think about what happens over a 2.5 year period, accidents happen.
Yeah. Well, we want to make sure that everybody's okay, because I don't want anything to happen in regards to the animals themselves intentionally. You know, it's one of those things that unfortunately it happened, but luckily things worked out for the best.
Yeah, and one of the strictest codes of any long rider is to put the health and welfare of a horse before, the rider, him or herself. A horse's safety and ability to drink water and consume food is put before any human. And so that's that philosophy has always helped Felipe get home safely, because his horses were so well taken care of.
And let's focus on that term real quick. Long rider. Long rider is someone that travels great distances, I presume. But like, how did this term come about? Just because of people going on these horseback riding adventures?
Yeah, I'm not sure when it was created, but there's something called the Long Riders Guild, and they've published a list of, I guess, criteria or mandates of what constitutes what a long rider is. So, by definition, a long rider is someone who rides 1,000 miles or more consecutively in a single journey. And so, if you've done that, then you are a member of the Long Riders Guild.
And what has the guild's reaction been to your documentary?
Extremely positive. They are so excited that this movie is shining a light on their community of riders, and I think there's many long riders around the world who are kind of waiting for this film to get out there.
You know, Westerns have had their ebb and flow in North America for quite some time. And now there's this resurgence of Westerns, whether it's been documentary films like yours, The Long Rider, or others about cattle ranchers and moving the cattle around, or even several just films themselves. What is our connection to the Old West that we just love this type of story?
I think it's just the fact that you can revert back to simpler times and live off the land, and your problems are not so complex that we're not talking about major world economic problems or legal issues. It's simple survival, and I think that's what's such a beautiful thing these days. We don't often depend on our own wits and our physical abilities to get from place to place, but in like a kind of a Western story that's first and foremost in the efforts to accomplish something.
And what did you learn about yourself in making this documentary about Felipe?
I learned when you write a script you have the beginning, middle, and end kind of plotted out. But in a documentary, you're sifting through 500 hours of footage to find those pieces. And what I loved about this process is the fact that I could go through, watch those 500 hours of footage, feel like I was on the journey with Felipe, and kind of internalize it myself and be able to bring that forward to an audience. It's very difficult and daunting to cut down 500 hours to the 90 minutes that you see and experience, but that's the I guess if I'm to pat myself on the back, it's for that purpose, to tell a story in a quick and concise manner for audiences to experience.
And was there something that you really wanted to be in the documentary that just didn't fit the narrative or the pace of the story, that had to end up on the cutting room floor, that you wish you could have incorporated into these 90 minutes?
Yeah, there was a ton. When I read Felipe's book, there are moments that kind of stuck out there that I was hoping to find footage of, but it didn't exist. I'm thinking of at one point where he was in Mexico and there was a town sort of party. The local mayor called him over to give him a present, and the present was a 16-year-old girl. And mayor locked them up in a room together, and Felipe wanted kind of nothing to do with that. So he didn't want to offend his host. So he messed up the girl messed up her hair, and they acted like that as they walked out. And it was a crazy part of his book that I'll always remember, but there just wasn't that footage in the documentary.
Wow. I mean, just being gifted a person,
it's sad.
is not something that we think of in the Western Hemisphere as being an appropriate gift anymore. Maybe,
No.
again, maybe 120, 130 years ago.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of details like that were kind of I don't want to say overlooked in the documentary, but add an extra layer of richness if you pick up Felipe's book. It's called Long Ride Home.
Yeah, the book is The Long Ride Home. The documentary is the Long Rider. There has to be something in this for everyone. What would you want the general audience, especially here on the West Coast, because I'm not going to lie to you, we are very spoiled here in Southern California. We have the beaches, we have the mountains, we got Disneyland, Universal Studios, all of Hollywood itself, et cetera, that, like, we're quite spoiled. And this incredible weather. I mean, it's going to be hot this weekend, but it's not going to be Arizona desert hot. What can people like us get out of this story?
I think you will go on a roller coaster ride of emotions, and you'll get those thrills and chills at the same time. So, not to slag on the big budget sort of Hollywood films, but they're often, sometimes surface level. There's a lot of explosions and fun things that happen, and dinosaurs making noises. But in this case, you'll get that epic adventure and that human experience along the way at the same time. If you don't root and fall in love with Felipe and his story, then you are a soulless human.
That's one way to guilt people into seeing the film.
Yeah. Well, it's true. Like everyone, all audiences that I talk to all want something new and fresh and want Hollywood to take a chance on something. But when that content is delivered and they don't show up, whose fault is it? So, this is an opportunity for us to tell a really amazing story, and give audiences that thrilling feeling of going to the movies, and hopefully they come out and support.
Well, it's going to be at Dances with Films June 16th. Remind us of the screening time again.
It's June 16th at 7 p.m. at the Chinese theaters in Hollywood.
Listen, Sean, it's been a great pleasure. The Long Rider is a fantastic documentary. Where can we find you and the film on social media if we want to connect, just so we can go and purchase tickets this weekend?
Awesome. Yeah. You can follow the film at The Long Rider Film on Facebook and Instagram. There's a website, longriderfilm.com. And I myself am at Sean Cisterna, SeanCisterna, and across all social media platforms. Reach out and connect anytime. I love interacting with people.
Sean Cisterna, thank you so much again. The Long Rider. I keep wanting to say Lone Ranger just because it has that really close tie to the name. The Long Rider, June 16th, Chinese theaters, 7 p.m. Dances with Films. Congratulations on a fantastic documentary.
Thanks so much, RC.